So I haven't been watching Nick Fuentes' show recently. However, I thought that last night he had a really powerful message for all Americans on this tragedy of what happened to Charlie Kirk. And I personally think that what I saw from Nick last night really displays the leadership that he has, because granted, he only made a few tweets yesterday or the day before. On Wednesday, he didn't make many tweets about the situation with Charlie Kirk. However, I saw a lot of people, because I spent basically almost 2 hours just refreshing and scrolling through Twitter as live news was coming in, and there were so many people with blue check marks, and I don't know that all of those people were political figures or celebrities or people who had a huge following to where they could influence other people with their tweets that they were posting. And so a lot of people were saying, oh, this is a left problem, this is them, they hate us, and there was more divisive rhetoric that I was seeing that I didn't like, and he didn't really participate in that. He just said, we need to be thinking of Charlie and all of that stuff. I'm paraphrasing now, I'll actually show his tweet later, but I think that it was really a good demonstration of how you would expect someone who is in this position of being able to influence other people and how they act and how they demonstrate for others to act. And so I think that was really powerful that he did that. Now, I do want to give a little bit of grace here, because for a lot of people on Wednesday, a lot of reactions were in the heat of the moment and really not even being able to fully process what was going on, because a lot of people who were reacting from the tweets that I saw, they knew Charlie personally, or they knew people who knew him, whereas I don't have that connection, so it's different for me. I don't necessarily have a parasocial relationship with him because I don't watch his content frequently and consistently, so that relationship is not there, but I can still acknowledge that, yes, I know who Charlie Kirk is, I know that he's a political figure and all of that stuff, right? So there is that acknowledgement that this happened, there is that acknowledgement that something very tragic happened to this very public figure. So why I wanted to do a video on Nick's episode from last night, because I thought it was kind of important to point out that Nick necessarily doesn't have the biggest following in terms of his subscriber count or his follower count compared to other right-wing or conservative politicians or public figures. So I find it very interesting that you kind of put it on the person who has less numbers, so to speak, but it also speaks to his influence, because obviously if you need somebody to kind of rally up or kind of bring the right together and kind of calm things down, you need someone who you think is going to be the person who is going to move things in that direction. They're not going to continue to stoke the tension and just create more problems, more divide, and more tension in society. So we'll dig into that a little bit later as well. And again, with that, I do want to acknowledge Wednesday, a lot of the posts and tweets were in the heat of the moment. They were also tribute posts. And so with needing somebody to step up for the right and kind of gather everybody and get things back on track and calm the tension and all of that stuff, you do need someone who's not in an emotional state, because you would not, you would not ask Charlie's wife to make a statement like this, right? Because understandably, she's going through something very tragic. So you would not necessarily ask his friends and the people who knew him, who are really grieving over this loss and what happened, to necessarily be the person who is expected to get everybody else in line and kind of make sure that people don't escalate things. I understand that is a difficult position to put someone in, but from the show that we saw last night, I'm really glad that Nick stepped up and did it. This is heyybritny, welcome back. Okay, first let's get into some updates. So I saw earlier today that Trump posted that they have the suspect, and from the short video and the article that I was reading, I think he went on Fox and Friends and basically gave this update, and he was saying that they have the suspect in custody, and then he was also saying that the suspect's father and maybe like a religious figure, so like a pastor or something like that, helped turn this guy in, because I have been seeing footage of people observing that somebody was on the roof. There's footage showing him jumping off the roof and then him walking through neighborhoods and all of that stuff, and you can't clearly make out who this person is. And then there was also people speculating that, hey, this person's out of the country by now, we're never going to find them. So hopefully this is the person who did it, because I know that on Wednesday, I think they arrested 1 or 2 people who were not the shooter. And so I do want to say something to that because in the reaction that I posted in reaction to everything that was happening on Wednesday when the news first came out, I was really talking a lot about white on white crime and how does this change things, because again, I really do believe that if this had been a black shooter, this would have just knocked the roof off of everything. All chaos would have been let loose, and we did see reports of HBUs having to go on lockdown and all of that stuff. They're getting threats, and I don't know exactly why anybody would be targeting HBCUs, and I don't know if it's because, hey, you know, the shooter is not these white men we think it is. It's probably somebody black, and people are just speculating and taking out their anger on HBCUs, and so I don't quite know the connection there, but I did see reports of that happening, and I also know that there's been other mass shootings that have happened since Charlie Kirk was shot. The other thing I want to give an update on is because in the video that I posted yesterday, I talked about watching Don Lemon's live stream, and basically he was playing clips of things that Charlie Kirk had said about the black community, and I acknowledged in that video that there probably was context missing. I also acknowledged that when you are trying to find clips to play, you usually want to find either the thing that makes your point or the most controversial, most provocative thing to get the message out there or to paint a certain picture. And so in regards to the empathy clip, because I saw this on a video that Brandon Tatum posted on Amanda Seales, and I didn't completely finish watching his video, but I saw enough of it to kind of understand the general gist. And so basically, on Don Lemon's show, he also played the empathy clip, and I don't remember where it got cut off. I think it may have gotten cut off when he said that he doesn't like empathy and something about dangerous, and then it cuts off. I don't know if they even made it to the part about what he said about sympathy. And so Brandon Tatum brings this up because Amanda Seales also talked about this, and she's just going on this rant and saying, or she's just going on and saying, you know, he didn't believe in empathy, I can't have empathy for him, there's no connection, all of that stuff. But when you actually play the full clip, because after Brandon pointed that out, I wanted to go and listen to the full clip and see what he actually said. And it's been very difficult to find clips of Charlie Kirk right now, because a lot of it is flooded with tribute posts and all of these different updates. So it's very hard, I feel, to find content, but I was able to find this on TikTok, and he does go on to say, you know, he's talking about Bill Clinton, and he's talking about empathy, and he's talking about kind of like how this kind of hurt politics in a sense, and then he says something to the effect of, I prefer sympathy over empathy, and then that he's not going to talk about that in that video because it's a different discussion. And so in terms of empathy and sympathy, empathy is feeling with someone, actively sharing their emotions by putting yourself in their shoes. Sympathy is feeling for someone, acknowledging their suffering and feeling pity or sorrow for their misfortune without necessarily experiencing their emotion. Empathy fosters connection, while sympathy maintains a distance and can sometimes lead to disconnection. And then there's one other part that I want to read out here on the emotional perspective and behavior key differences. Emotional connection. Empathy builds a deep emotional connection by creating a feeling of shared experience. Sympathy, on the other hand, maintains emotional distance, acknowledging the situation from the outside. Perspective. Empathy requires you to adopt the other person's viewpoint to understand their feelings. Sympathy is more about recognizing their pain from your own perspective. Behavior. Empathy often motivates altruistic actions to alleviate someone's distress, as you are more attuned to their feelings and needs. Sympathy may lead to a desire to help, but it's a feeling of pity for their misfortune rather than a shared emotional understanding. So I think that's a good point to leave it, just to clear up that whole confusion on what he actually said about empathy. I think it is important to call that out, and I don't want to get into the other clips that Don Lemon played. So the general gist of what I'm saying here is that obviously when you see clips, you need to take that with a grain of salt. That's something that I've really had to learn more so from watching Candace, and then also with me trying to create my own content and trying to include videos in my own videos, and how difficult it is because you don't want it to be super long, and then you want it to be short enough that it captures the point, but what combination, what sentences do you use to make your point? And it's very easy to post or to make a viral clip of something that's really outrageous and controversial while also really missing the actual context of where that quote came from. Because so I will just leave that there, because it is something to keep in mind. And even if you don't yourself go and pursue the full clip, you should at least have in the back of your mind, if someone is telling you something, that you need to take it with a grain of salt, that they may not be telling you the full picture, because that is really important, especially as we continue to watch videos and consume people's content, to really understand if they're telling us the truth and then how we feel about it. And if you're someone who is going to do the research no matter what, then obviously kudos to you, but there's a lot of people who are going to take some of these comments at face value and not really understand the full context. So with that in mind, I do want to watch Charlie Kirk's Jubilee debate. I have not seen that. I've only seen a few clips here and there, but I do want to go back and look at that, because again, this is about understanding why there's so much divide in terms of how people see Charlie Kirk. Okay, moving on, let's get into Nick's tweets. So this is a screenshot of his tweets going back to Wednesday, and I really like that he just keeps his tweets simple. He's not trying to create a divide. He's not saying anything crazy, because again, I scrolled Twitter on Wednesday and there was just a lot of different posts and things that were being said, and it really was like getting whiplash. So the first thing that he posted, pray for Charlie Kirk. This feels like a nightmare, one of the most horrific things I've ever seen. I feel absolutely gutted and devastated. Pray for Charlie Kirk, stole his young family, and for our country. The violence and hatred has to stop. Our country needs Christ now more than ever. And then, given the gravity of today's events, I will not be doing a show tonight. Instead, let us all say a prayer for the repose of Charlie Kirk's soul and for his grieving family. How we choose to respond to this watershed moment is profoundly important, and we should all sleep on it. And then he makes the post that he'll be discussing the assassination of Charlie Kirk. So I really like that his message is simple and to the point. It's about praying for Charlie Kirk's family. It's about understanding the gravity of his situation. And it's about trying to unite people. There were other posts again instantly saying, hey, this is because of the left, this is because of the right, this is because of Donald Trump, this is because of whoever, right? And so a lot of the conversation that I've been seeing, in addition to those types of posts and messaging, is that we don't actually know why the shooter did that, which I think is a very valid point. We can kind of only speculate on why we think this happened based on what we know about Charlie Kirk and what we know about his public persona and what we know about what his presence is in the world as far as social media and the different and various platforms that he has. Now, why I really like Nick's tweets in this moment is because in his episode from last night, he's very clear that he and Charlie Kirk are not friends, they were adversaries, and he says that he's never met him in person. He's been close to him in person, but he's never actually met him. He's never shaken his hand, all of that stuff. And he's basically saying that they don't have this relationship to where he, I guess, would have a emotional reaction in terms of being completely devastated because this was his best friend or something like that, right? But he is still able to understand what happened to Charlie Kirk and the gravity of it, and he has the appropriate emotional response to this situation. And I think that is key, because there are a lot of people who don't like Charlie Kirk for many various different reasons, and they had the opposite reaction. They were celebrating, they were excited that this happened. And one thing I want to comment on is because basically what I was saying is that for these people who are celebrating, I'm probably giving them the benefit of the doubt here, but I think that for some people, they may not have seen the footage and they just heard that Charlie Kirk was shot, and if you hear it in that context, you may assume like, oh, he was shot in the arm or the leg or something non-fatal. But if you saw the shot even from a distance and then the up close shot and you were still making crazy comments, I think that is really wild, because when I was watching Nick's video yesterday, I was going through the recording that I have, and the video of him getting shot kept playing, and I literally felt nauseous and sick just seeing that. And so I can't imagine other people seeing that and then celebrating it with that sickness and that sick feeling that I feel. And so when you put it in that perspective and you see, hey, someone saw this and they celebrated it, it's very jarring and very kind of just shocking because of my own intense reaction to that. And I don't even know Charlie Kirk, and so I can't imagine how the people who do know him are feeling having seen that graphic footage. And getting back to Nick, so I really like that he is saying, no, this is the nature of our relationship. We were not friends, but I can sympathize with the people who are his friends and the people who knew him. He understands how tragic this event is. And I think this really speaks to Nick's character, that he was able to publicly acknowledge on his show last night the platform and the influence and the impact that Charlie Kirk has had on our community and the younger generation specifically. And then Nick goes on and he's really talking about like, hey, for the people who celebrated that something like this happened, they are just thinking, this is me in my own words now, they are basically just thinking in the moment and not really understanding what this moment leads to. There's been so much talk online, on social media, that this is going to lead to a civil war where we have different groups, different factions, different sets of people fighting over many different things as a result of this assassination. And I think that is super problematic because to me, the average American is not going to know what a civil war is going to look like a civil war here in America, not somewhere else, but here in America. And there's been so many books and movies about civil wars in America and what that would look like, but I don't think people are actually prepared for it. And so what I want to point to, because in terms of how the Black community is responding to this, in the Black communities, there's gun violence all the time, there's gang violence all the time, right? And so for Black people, they understand kind of naturally where this may lead, even if they're not sad for what happened to Charlie Kirk. They understand what happens when there's an extreme act of violence towards someone who is kind of a loved and cherished public figure, right? So what I want to point to is Boys in the Hood. So Doughboy, I think he shot somebody and then somebody else was messing with his brother, and so he was on guard, he was on the lookout trying to protect himself and his brother. Then his brother Ricky got shot, he retaliated, and he knew that whoever he had killed, that person's people, their friend and their gang members, whatever, were gonna go after him next, and then he was dead 2 weeks later. So it's this repetitive cycle of violence to where it's basically an eye for an eye, and that is what could happen if people are really wanting to escalate things as a result of what happened to Charlie. And again, we don't even know officially why this was done, so you can have a lot of people out there making assumptions and doing crazy stuff because they're doing it from a emotional place, and they're also acting out this need for revenge. If you've never seen Boys in the Hood, something that you can point to is 1923, the Yellowstone spinoff. And so this makes me think of, when I think of a civil war and how intense and graphic this is, even though this wasn't necessarily a traditional war, I'm pointing to the shootout when Spencer Dutton comes home on the train, how everyone is out there waiting for him, they just want to shoot him on sight, and he has to shoot back and defend himself. It is just a bloodbath. And so the average American, we don't live like that. We may have guns in our home, but we're not having to defend ourselves from a gang of people and constantly be on alert. There's some men who carry guns and they are on the look and they're prepared to defend themselves, but I don't think that the average American is like that. And so I would hate to see a civil war happen. I'm definitely not prepared for that, and I really wish that we could come together as a country and understand that all of this violence has to stop, and this is something that Nick actively and consistently preaches to in his show from last night. So we're going to play a clip from Nick speaking on just that.
The day that someone gets shot for the disagreement, if you can't bring yourself to show the slightest ounce of humanity to a moderate Republican who got killed for no reason, this is a moment we all recognize could set us down the path towards a civil war, could set us down the path towards unbelievable horror, suffering, bloodshed. If you can't bring yourself, even for the selfish sake of yourself or your own people or your own pathetic side, to show the slightest ounce of humility, of mercy, of magnanimity, benevolence, charity, then you are no better than the killer.
That is a pretty strong and powerful statement, just because even if you for whatever reason, don't care about what happened to Charlie Kirk, you should understand the repercussions of this and what this may potentially lead to. And you should want to protect your family and friends. You should want to de-escalate it just from that perspective and making sure that nobody else gets hurt, of making sure that you don't get hurt, right? And so you can't necessarily have this indifference to what happened to Charlie Kirk and be blind to what could possibly be coming next, because a lot of people are scared right now because you don't know who else is going to be targeted. Hopefully nobody else is targeted, right? And so you can't control other people, and so this is a really, really scary time to be in. So next I want to talk about the next steps, and this is really talking about how Nick was approached to take on this responsibility of uniting everyone and getting everyone to stop the cycle of violence. And so he talks about how some people on the left reach out to him and said, hey, we're scared. You need to rally everyone. You need to try to calm things down. We're counting on you, basically. As I mentioned earlier, this speaks to the leadership skills that he has and the influence that he has, that you're technically going after somebody with the smallest number, the lower number of followers and subscribers, and putting this responsibility on them to de-escalate things. And so I can acknowledge that must be a huge weight on your shoulders to deliver something that, one, resonates with people and sends a very strong message. And so I can understand the toll that can take on a person who is expected to rise to the occasion in that sense. And so in that sense, it is good that this is someone who is not directly connected to Charlie, and this is not his best friend. This is someone who is actively feuding with him just a few weeks ago and trying to get a debate between Charlie Kirk and Nick Fuentes, right? So this is someone who is on opposite sides of the aisle in terms of a debate and all of that stuff with Charlie Kirk, right? It's this person who is rising up and saying, no, we need to stop. And so I think that is what really makes this powerful, that this message is coming from him. And obviously the people on the left would want to reach out to other political either figures or public figures who can reach the right-wing base, because as a left-wing person, you may not be able to say anything that resonates or is effectively received by any conservatives, any Republicans, or any far-right people, right? You need somebody on that side to step up and kind of gather the troops and lead the troops, right? This message cannot come from someone on the left. And so I understand why they went to Nick Fuentes with this responsibility, but I also wonder how many other people they reached out to. And again, I think that it makes more sense, in my opinion, that this message came from Nick. And I haven't really watched any other videos from different politicians on this. I know that most of the stuff that seems to be released right now is more so tribute videos, and so it's not necessarily, it could be a combination of tribute videos and also a call to stop the violence. I would not know because I haven't consumed a lot of that content, but yeah, so that's just my thinking on why this message came from Nick. So we're gonna go ahead and play that clip.
Here is what I will say about left-wingers, because a lot of left-wing people reached out to me and they told me, you have a responsibility. They said, we're afraid right now. They said, you need to lead people away from violence. I agree with them. But where was that mentality when someone showed up at my house with a gun and failed? Those people are not reaching out then. Where was that mentality throughout all of the persecutions, all the suffering? Now, this is speaking from a place of resentment. They're afraid. They're afraid that the right is going to punch back 1,000 times as hard. And we could, and we can. And I fear that some might. And I hope to God that they don't. In some sense, the right to be afraid. We should all be afraid that something we cannot control may happen.
So what I want to point out in that clip is Nick obviously does have some resentment because he experienced basically a similar situation where someone tried to kill him and hurt him. And I think he was saying in a interview discussion that he did with Alex Jones, that basically nobody reached out to him. Very little people reached out to him when he had that experience. And so obviously there's going to be some resentment because people are rallying around this other person and nobody supported you. So I can absolutely understand that. But I also want to point out that I think it is a little bit different, because it's different when someone tries to attack you or shoots you and you survive. So that's Nick. Someone tried to attack him, he's still alive. Trump, somebody tried to shoot him, he's still alive. And so the message or the gravity doesn't land the same way when someone survives, you know what I mean, versus when you see someone brutally and graphically murdered on camera for everyone to see. I think that is what makes it very different, because there's no coming back from that, right? You can't say that person survived. They died. They literally lost their life to this violence. And so I think that is the difference in why someone would rally around Charlie Kirk in this instance, because it's so much, because the outcome is so different. Now you understand, hey, the violence really needs to stop. So in this clip, Nick definitely has some resentment. I think it's good that he acknowledges that, because if people didn't come around to say, hey, we need to unite, we need to stop the cycle of violence, that would be more concerning, because then there would be no hope for society if we are all just indifferent to all types of violence and nothing can unite us. And I also think it is important to acknowledge that Nick says, hey, we can hit back hard, we can go crazy, we can do whatever, right? But he says we shouldn't, and he hopes that it doesn't escalate from here. He truly wants the violence to stop. So yes, you can retaliate, you can get your revenge or whatever on whoever, right? But you should not do that. That's not the right thing to do. You should not react in such a emotional way to what happened to Charlie Kirk by taking someone else's life. Like, that's not the right thing to do. You have to sit back and reflect on this situation and really truly try to understand how we got here to where we're just openly resorting to violence because we don't like what someone said. And so I think that was a really powerful statement that he made as far as taking on this responsibility and making it clear that he doesn't want anything even more escalated to happen as a result of what happened to Charlie Kirk. And it's not in this clip, but he also goes on to talk more about the Civil War and what this would lead to. He talks about how there's going to be dead kids, dead parents, there's going to be bloodshed, and if we're just all resorting to violence, we're just going to be ruled by warlords who are always going to keep us in this state of having to constantly fight and defend ourselves and protect other people and all of that stuff. And it's gonna look very ugly. Like, I've obviously never been in a civil war. I have no idea what that looks like. And so many people are truly not prepared for that. And so if we're not prepared for that and we don't want that to happen, we truly have to unite as a country, as one group of people, to shut down all of this violence that has been happening. This next clip that I'm gonna play is one of Nick's stronger calls to inaction in his episode from last night. So I'm just going to go ahead and play that clip.
You can turn down the temperature. The left in America now, everybody in America now must come together and disavow this nihilistic, malevolent violence. You all have an obligation. I have that obligation, and I think I have done it. I condemn the violence, all of it, all of the nihilistic violence, whether it comes from the far right, the far left, whether it comes from a Dylan Roof, the Buffalo shooter, or someone like this. It's your job too. You must condemn it loudly, loud enough that we can hear it, and you have to mean it.
So again, this is him making a call that everyone needs to disavow this type of violence or violence in general. We can't have people who are saying, yay, this is a good thing, and then they're going out and committing their own violence. Or we can't have people who are emotional and angry going out and committing their own violence because they really want revenge or they really want to make other people hurt. We really have to come together and say, this cannot happen, this is not allowed to happen, and this will not happen again. I don't think I have a clip of this, but he also talks about how for the people who were celebrating this moment of Charlie Kirk being assassinated and just really glad about this situation for whatever reason, he was really talking about how these types of people are evil. However, I believe he did make a point where he was basically saying, like, hey, if you were just kind of being stupid and basically not really understanding the gravity of a situation, you can be forgiven if you understand and recognize, hey, this was a really crappy thing that I did, and you basically repent and you try to restore things and you try to disavow the violence and say, hey, actually I was wrong, this was not a good moment to celebrate, there's nothing happy here, this should not have happened, I don't condone that, all of that stuff, right? And so he's saying there's a little bit of hope for those people who basically do a 180 and course correct and realize the error of their ways, basically. For the people who are still sticking to this and saying, I'm glad that this happened and blah, 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 those people are the real threat to society, because at this point, what he's really saying, this is basically about good and evil. It's not about left and right or Dems and Republicans and all of that. It's about really understanding that something evil happened, and there's people who are celebrating evil, and then there's the people on the good side who are fighting that evil. And so if you reacted in a horrible way on Wednesday, Thursday, whatever, he's saying if you recognize the error of your ways, you can be forgiven for that. But if you continue to celebrate this, if you continue to be excited about this, if you continue to encourage violence in this way, then you're part of the problem. And he makes it very clear, like, hey, I'm not saying you need to go out and be violent against these people. You need to politically destroy them. You need to make sure that they are shunned from society and all of that stuff. And so throughout this episode, he is making it clear that he disavows violence and he does not want anyone to resort to violence. Use your words to disagree with people or to draw attention to a cause. Do not use violence. Now, in regards to his followers, I'm glad that he, one, tried to unite all of America with this video from last night, but then also that he spoke directly to his followers on what his expectations are of them. So I'll play that.
I pray to God there is no further violence. I pray to God that nobody else is hurt as a result of this. I hope that it stops here. It should stop here. To all of my followers, if you take up arms, I disavow you, I disown you in the strongest possible terms. That is not what we are about. And the same goes obviously for the other side. And I want to make that very clear. It would be a profound moral, political mistake for anybody to take the bait.
So in this clip, I really like that he's speaking directly to his followers. He's the head of the Groypers, so it is his responsibility in a sense to make sure that the people under him, his platform, the people who follow him, that they understand his expectation and what he wants going forward as far as uniting everyone and not wanting violence to escalate. And so I think it is good because, he can just lecture everyone else, but it is also important that he speaks to his followers, because the people who follow him probably also follow other right-wing or conservative public figures, right? And so they may not just be listening to him, but they also need to hear him say, like, no, this has to stop, no more violence, and if you do something stupid, if you try to get revenge or retaliate in any way, I disown you, I disavow you, I don't condone that. And so I think it is really strong that he has that messaging, one, for the rest of America, but also for his own followers, because you can't expect other people to make this call to action to stop the violence, but they're not saying anything to your own people. So I'm really glad that he is basically speaking to everyone in last night's episode. Now, moving on, he made a really good point about God's justice, and it's not on us to get revenge. We need to put it in God's hands and let him do what he does, and all we can do is pray. All we can do is treat other people with respect. All we can do is use our words when we disagree with someone. We should not resort to violence and do things when we are overly emotional, because down the line, you're going to regret what you did and you can't take it back. We can see from what happened to Charlie Kirk, there's no taking this back. So let's go ahead and play that clip.
Vengeance belongs to God. God is both merciful and just. And no one can say they have faith in God if they do not have faith in God's perfect justice, which we cannot understand, which is hard to accept, sometimes impossible. But that's what it is to be a Christian. That's what it was like to be the first Christians, to watch God himself nailed to a cross for the sake of everyone. You cannot tell me you have faith in God if you don't have faith that all of those people that seek to hurt us will ultimately meet Their divinely appointed justice at God's hands, but not our own. Those lives are not ours to take.
So I really like that he ends that clip with those lives are not ours to take, because I was talking about in the other video from yesterday that I did, I was talking about how basically it wasn't Charlie's time to go. That was somebody else imposing their own will on Charlie and the situation. And so I think it is really powerful here that he is saying no violence, no revenge, no retaliation, give it to God, leave it to God. Those lives are not yours to take. I think that is really profound, because there are a lot of people who are not even thinking about it like that. They're just thinking, oh, I need to hurt somebody, and people say, oh, hurt people. No, you can make a choice to stop the violence. You can make a choice to give it to God and just let whatever happens from there happen, and understand and believe and be reassured that God truly will take care of all of us, as long as we are on the side of good when it comes to good and evil. So I'm going to pause here because I'm just getting a news alert about a update on the suspect. So it looks like this is a 22-year-old kid from Utah. We know that photos have been shared of what the shooter looks like. I don't know if there's any additional information from what Trump said earlier, but it looks like we do have a name for this person, so hopefully we should be finding out more soon. Okay, so now I'm going to move on back to Nick. We do have one more clip to play. This is basically another call to action from Nick on how we really need to unite as a country, as one group of people, and really stop the violence.
The first thing that we need to do, and everybody needs to be on the same page here. Right, left, middle. I am calling on everybody. Today we are all Americans. Today we are all Christians, in that we want the cycle of retributive vengeance and violence to stop. In that sense, today, we are all Christians, whether culturally, religiously, we are all Americans. We all want to see our country pull through. We all want to see our loved ones survive. Liberal or conservative, we all want to be around for the next Christmas. We all want to see our children graduate college in the spring. I'm calling on everybody. We all have a place in this. Everybody must condemn this violence. You don't need to condemn Kamala Harris. You don't need to condemn liberalism. You don't need to condemn whatever issue it is. You must condemn the violence at the minimum.
So this is, again, another really powerful statement from Nick. He's saying, hey, we are all Americans, we are all Christians, we need to condemn the violence. It's not so much about ideology left and right, it's about making sure that the violence stops. And earlier in his video from yesterday, he was talking about why someone would do this, and he was basically saying somebody's not doing this because of their ideology or because they wanted Kamala to win or whatever. He's saying that the people who resort to this type of violence to solve whatever disputes or conflicts they have, they are doing this because they are lost. So again, this goes back to good and evil, and how what side ultimately you want to be on when it comes to preserving society and making sure that this is a world that continues for the next however many years. Not that the world will just suddenly end, but the world as you know it will drastically change as a result of what happened to Charlie Kirk. And it really depends on how so many people react in this moment. What are the next steps? Whatever the next steps are really determines how it goes for the rest of society. And so we really need to make sure that everyone is disavowing violence. Everyone is saying that this cannot happen, that this cannot continue. And so I think that this was a powerful episode and video from Nick Fuentes. Now, in terms of what he says about next steps, so he's basically telling young men, you need to get involved in politics, you need to start thinking about how you can make a difference. And he's basically speaking to young men, and he does say at some point, hey, this goes for all people. And so I really wish that, I know that he is basically the leader of disaffected white men, but I also think he represents so much more than that as well. And so I do hope that he gives a broader message of saying, all people who want to make a difference, you need to get involved in politics, you need to be active. And he's saying, this is not just about putting stickers or passing out flyers. You really need to get involved to a point where you truly can make a difference. And I think that that is super important. He also speaks to young men and say, hey, I don't do this, but get in the gym, make sure that you are hard to kill, make sure that you can defend yourself for one, but two, make sure that your ideas live on. And so I think that that is also super important as well. And then I also think that it's really good that he gave this other message of, in order to make a difference, you have to do the boring stuff, because people can think about what it means to be a public figure or a politician. Some people get into politics for the money, as far as like the other places that you can get money, as far as donors and all of that stuff, right? Some people are in politics because they truly want to make a difference. And then in connection to that, a lot of people can get involved in politics and want to be a public figure because they like the limelight. He's saying that in order to make a difference, you actually have to be all about the boring work, the day-to-day and the hard work and the grind that you have to do and be committed to in order to truly make a difference. And I think that is so important, because we live in a society where people want a quick fix, or they expect things to happen very quickly without really understanding that you have to put the time in, you have to put the work in to truly get to where you want to go. And where we want to go is that where I want to go is that I want to live in a society where everyone can live the best life that they can. There's no violence, there's no discrimination, there's no divisiveness. We are all truly one group of people who are different races, different genders, different religions, but we all coexist in a peaceful way. And that is something that should absolutely happen in America, regardless of what America is historically known for, regardless of America's tragic past with slavery and different race relations and all of that stuff. Going forward, we can create a new America where it's peaceful, where everyone can coexist and there's no violence. And that is something that we have the power to do. And that really starts with each and every person disavowing violence. And so I think that this was a really powerful episode from Nick Fuentes, and I hope that a lot of people hear this video, and that's why I'm also wanting to report on it and share this on my own video and talk about this, because I think that this is super important that we hear from people who have influence, who are all about uniting us instead of creating further division. So I hope that you go and pursue the video in full if you have not watched it yet. So to wrap up this video, this is a great episode from Nick Fuentes. We had something really tragic happen on Friday, and regardless of whether or not you truly understand what the act of violence against Charlie Kirk means and what it represents, you should have an awareness that we are in a very dangerous time right now, and it depends on how so many people react as far as the next steps and what our society will end up as and what society we will live in going forward. And so I think it is super important, like Nick was saying, any negative feelings that you have, any negative emotions, transmute that into something good, into a righteous cause. And so if you are feeling angry and confused and hurt, know that you can turn that into positive action to make a difference and create a society where this type of stuff doesn't happen again. Feel free to continue the discussion in the comment section below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.